1 Kings 8 and 2 Chronicles 5. Well, you've often heard that we can't put God in a box, and how true that is. This is one of Solomon's wisest statements that he ever makes, tucked into really just one verse of a very long prayer that we'll talk about in future videos. In 1 Kings 8:27, or 1 Kings 8, Solomon is giving a dedicatory prayer to God about this temple that he has made. He has just put the Ark of the Covenant into the Holy of Holies. And he makes this comment or statement that if God, you God, cannot be held by what he calls the heaven of heavens, or the great expanse of the heavens, if you cannot be withheld by that or cannot be contained there, then who am I to give you a house for you to live in? Well, that's more than just an idea of, God, you're too big for this house. It's really not the concept of bigness at all. In fact, I think this is a very cosmopolitan, philosophically deep statement by Solomon, trying to express, maybe even to his own people, something he's been thinking about, that they need to realize that the idea of a spiritual God, like a creator God, cannot be physically even attached to a physical place. Now, why is this important? Well, in the history of Israel, they have made mistakes of thinking that God could be locatable to a box. Remember in 1 Samuel 4, they took the Ark of the Covenant into battle, thinking it would be a rabbit's foot, that God had to go with his footstool, right? And God basically taught them, or God taught them, no, I do not have to physically stick with the ark, because again, I'm a spirit, and spirits are not locatable on a physical object. That's a category mistake to think in those terms. And again, Jeremiah 7, 400 years down the road, we're going to hear people chanting the word, the temple, as though God had to be loyal to Israel because his house was still standing, even at that late stage of the story. And God will say no. Through Jeremiah, he'll say no, that the temple is not any proof of God's presence or favor with Israel, because again, it's a physical object, and Yahweh and spirits are not physical. So I think it's a deeply philosophical moment, shall we say, in Israel's history, for them to dwell on this idea that Yahweh is not locatable. Now, and I've had a lot of strange looks over the years in college classrooms as I drone on and on about this, so I'll make it short. But here's what I would say to keep track of, again, even as we get into the story of Jesus and how that's going to work, that when a being is a spirit it's real, right? But when that spirit, and I've always used this dotted line to symbolize the different worlds, but of course that's just a symbol. We shouldn't think of the spiritual world as up any more than down. There's no direction, right, with the spiritual world, but this is how we do it. So when this spirit comes to our world, we often want to, because of Hollywood, locate them as though the spirit is sitting over there on the chair. Well, unless the spirit becomes part of a human body or a physical object, just the very idea of where becomes lost once they join our world. Why is that? Because, again, and we don't know how to think outside of this, so we have to be careful, but our world is three-dimensional. It's physical. So our physical world, we can go places. Remember, the spiritual world is not dimensional. It's not just a physical being that's invisible. It's a spirit, and spirits are not dimensional. So there is, between these two worlds, a category difference that's so hard to understand. And again, I'm not saying I understand it. I'm just saying that I'm agreeing with Solomon that when Yahweh is understood to be, quote, living in this building, we are going to take that as symbol. We are, and I think Solomon would have wanted people, that we are only taking this as a symbolic throne room, not as the real one. Very quickly, in closing, why is this important? Because Jesus, in John 4, will be talking to a Samaritan woman who is going to think that, well, we worship up here in Gerizim, you Jews worship down in Jerusalem. There was a temple at the time, of course, a second version of this one. And Jesus will stop her in John 4 and say, God is looking for those who worship him in spirit and in truth. And I take those words, and we'll talk about it, of course, when we get there, that true worship is not attached to a physical object. It can't be, based upon how God interacts with physical structures.